Hello, and welcome back to another episode recap where I'll lay out 5 things that I learned from my conversation with a historical expert. Today, we're recapping the conversation that I had with Jim Hessler and Eric Lindblad about the historical accuracy of Gettysburg. Jim and Eric are both Gettysburg licensed battlefield guides and are the co-hosts of the Battle of Gettysburg podcast. Now, if you haven't had the time to listen to my full interview with Jim and Eric yet, well, that's why I'm here today in this video to recap the 5 things that I learned about the historical accuracy of the movie Gettysburg with Jim Hessler and Eric Lindblad. So let's get started. Number 1, the climactic battle. The way the movie shows the Battle of Gettysburg, it'd be real easy to come away thinking that whichever side wins the battle is going to win the overall war. The balance of the entire American Civil War rests on the Battle of Gettysburg. And I suppose that case could be made since we know, looking back on the event through a historical lens, that that's exactly what happened. The Union won both the Battle of Gettysburg and the overall war. But Jim and Eric pointed out that even though a victory in the North could have gone a long way for the Confederacy, a victory at Gettysburg didn't mean a shoo-in victory for either side for the overall war. In fact, if we're looking at it through a historical lens, then we know that even though General Lee's army was defeated, he still managed to retreat from Gettysburg with most of his remaining army intact, and that was a retreat that allowed him to keep fighting for another 2 years. Number 2, the timeline of the Second Maine. In the movie, one of the storylines we see is of the men of the Second Maine and how they're refusing to fight. Jim and Eric pointed out that even though that did happen, the timeline was way off. The movie shows it happening right before the Battle of Gettysburg started on July 1st, but in truth, it happened in mid-May. Number 3, fighting for the high ground. Another huge takeaway you may get from watching the movie is that the reason why the battle happened at Gettysburg was because of the high ground. We see Sam Elliott's version of General Buford arrive a little early and set up his defenses at the high ground, and there are numerous mentions of the high ground throughout the movie. Jim and Eric pointed out that the movie overplays the idea of the high ground being the primary reason for the fight. Instead, they told me that what really happened was both sides were aware of the presence of the other. They just weren't entirely sure how large the opposing force was. For example, the Union knew that there were some Confederates massing to the west of Gettysburg, but they didn't really know how large the army there was. Jim and Eric told me that one of the big reasons why Gettysburg was so important to both sides was because of the numerous roads that intersect in and around town. Control of those roads would have been huge at a time when, as they pointed out, Pennsylvania was the second largest state in the nation. Number 4, Lee's obsession to attack. The movie seems to imply that General Longstreet wanted to be more conservative, more defensive in their strategy, while General Lee wants to keep pushing forward. He's almost got this obsession to be on the offensive. And the way the movie describes things, if the Battle of Gettysburg was going to decide the overall outcome of the war, then I guess that could make sense. Jim and Eric pointed out that one of the sources for the book that the movie was based on was General Longstreet's memoirs, who suggested in them that he and Lee had agreed to only fight defensive battles. But they also pointed out that quite a few battles indicate that Lee was an offensive-minded general before the Battle of Gettysburg even started. So they told me the idea that General Lee had this obsession to attack wasn't really true. Number 5, Pickett's charge, a Hail Mary. I loved this metaphor that Eric gave of the offensive push we now know as Pickett's charge, as being sort of like the last seconds of a football game where a team goes for a Hail Mary pass. While they're a long shot, they do work sometimes. In this case, Jim and Eric told me that General Lee's order to charge relied very heavily on the Confederate artillery being able to soften up the Union defenses. In the end, we know the artillery didn't work, and Pickett's charge failed, bringing a rather decisive end to the Battle of Gettysburg. That's all for today, and hopefully you enjoyed this episode recap of 5 things that I learned from Jim Hessler and Eric Lindblad about the historical accuracy of the movie Gettysburg. Now, my chat with Jim and Eric was over an hour long, so we covered a ton of information that I didn't get the chance to talk about in this quick recap. You can listen to that whole interview for free right now over at basedonatruestorypodcast.com/160. Once again, that's basedonatruestorypodcast.com/160. And for more of the true story behind the Battle of Gettysburg, go subscribe to Jim and Eric's excellent podcast called The Battle of Gettysburg Podcast. In the meantime, for more recaps and full-length episodes of Based on a True Story, hit that subscribe button right now. Thanks for watching.